Welcome. Welcome. You are listening to audio from the table. If you'd like to learn more about our community or donate to this ministry, please visit thetabletx.com.
Correctly. Oh, awesome. Yes, so my name is Jesse and I have all the answers. I don't, I really wanted to say that tonight for some reason. In fact, I have 0 answers. No, thank you. Worship team, whoa, it was really special. I'm looking for where'd you all go? There's Carrie. Okay. Yes, and Joe, Josh, I wish you guys knew how much work that takes. They make it look very easy, but it actually takes a lot of work. So I'm very glad to be here during the season of Advent. And for those who are unfamiliar with Advent, it's just the 4-week period leading up to Christmas, that Christians are celebrating and looking forward to the birth of Jesus. We have these fancy candles over here. Did anyone else grow up in church lighting these every week? Yes, and how many of you forgot which candle was supposed to be which week all the time? This happened to me when I was a pastor all the time. I'd be like, God, is it the pink one this week? I don't know. Actually, it is the pink one this week, technically. I remembered. That's what Advent is. And it's the time of year that we read the Christmas story, the narrative of the birth of Jesus, more than pretty much any other time of year. I don't really know anyone who's reading that story throughout the year. So we read it this time of year. And I love Bible stories. I've always loved them. They have rich meaning for our lives. But here's the thing. There was a point not long ago when I just started questioning the Bible stories that I was reading. And I just had this kind of low-level skepticism that was growing in me. I was in seminary, and my mind was being blown by much smarter people than me. And they're like, actually, it's this. And I'd be like, what? And the thing is that this story, the Christmas story, is a very cute story, right? We have little nativity scenes that have little, shepherds and sheep and an angel that's like, here's Jesus, And it's very cute and warm and cozy, and we read it during Christmas. But there is a part of this story that my skepticism grabbed onto really, really tightly some years ago, and it is that part of the Christmas story that I really want to focus on because I have a mic tonight, and that is a powerful feeling. So buckle up, baby. Nailed the intro. Let's begin. So it's true. It literally says, you guys really want to know, it says buckle up, baby, in my notes. I wrote that intentionally. So we're going to open our Bibles either physically, electronically, or turn your attention to the screens. We're going to start in the Gospel according to Matthew, chapter 2, verse 1. After Jesus was born in Bethlehem in Judea, during the time of King Herod, Magi from the east came to Jerusalem and asked, "Where is the one who is born King of the Jews? We saw his star, and when it rose, and have come to worship him." So this thing is happening. And King Herod has heard about this kid being born, and he is really freaked out, because kings are highly insecure people. And he is. He calls this meeting with all the religious leaders, and he says, "Hey, where's this kid supposed to be born?" And they're like, "Well, the scriptures say Bethlehem." He's like, "Awesome." And the Magi come, and he calls them saying, "Hey, when did this star first appear?" They're like, "Well, it appeared at this time, and it was bright, so we followed it. Here we are." And he's like, "I want you to go find this kid and come back to me and let me know where he's at so I can also pay my respects," which we all know means he wants to kill him. So picking up in verse 9, after they had heard the king, they went on their way, and the star they had seen when it rose went ahead of them until it stopped over the place where the child was. When they saw the star, they were overjoyed. On coming to the house, they saw the child with his mother, Mary, and they bowed down and worshiped him. This is the part of the story that inspired the song, the Christmas banger, if you will, We Three Kings. Anybody know the song? We three kings of Orient are bearing gifts, we traverse afar. For my whole life, I said traveled so far. Nope. Traverse afar. Field and fountain, moor and mountain, following yonder star. Oh, star of wonder, star of night. So we're not going to sing it. Star with royal beauty bright, westward leading, still proceeding, guide us to thy perfect light. Beautiful song. I'm assuming most people have heard it in some form or fashion. It's pretty popular. Great song. But this is the part of the story that feels surrounded in mystery and, in my opinion, kind of comes out of nowhere. It feels very random in the story. And this is where my skepticism comes in. Because what in the world are these magi doing, traveling so far to see a kid that has nothing to do with their religion? Like, I really, it hit me one day that I'm like, what is going on here? And you're telling me that some sort of star perfectly led them to Bethlehem. They were just like, hey guys, look, there's a cool star. Let's pack up the posse and go. Really? Do we really think that that's how it went? And mind you that this star led them 900 plus miles to Bethlehem. And it just like stopped over the house. They're like, oh, we're here. We made it. The skeptic in me sees this as lazy storytelling. I mean, I know. Any past evangelical people should feel super uncomfortable with what I just said, because boy, do I. Lazy storytelling in the gospel. Yikes. Because, for instance, it feels like lazy storytelling, kind of like Jonah and the whale. Like Jonah gets thrown into the water because he's sinful. He's about to drown, and ooh, a whale comes and swallows him, spits him out. Everything's good. Convenient, a whale was there. Kind of like this. I can imagine like if somebody were going to pitch this movie, that all these guys in fancy suits are sitting at the table, and they're like, okay, so we know that the Magi need to get to Bethlehem, but how are we going to get them there? Does anyone have any ideas? And some guy at the end of the table is like, I have an idea. What if? Go with me here. They follow a star. And some guy's like, brilliant. Let's go with that. Weird. It's just weird to me. It feels like lazy storytelling. So because that was where my heart was, I immediately started to dig in and be like, okay, I got to figure this out. Further study showed me this. Firstly, these were not three kings. I hope I didn't just ruin somebody's childhood. These were not three kings. No, they were called magi or magians. Scholarship isn't totally sure who these people were. Surprise, surprise, they never do. But we have a decent idea of the possibilities, right? So these magi could have been Magians, men of the Zoroastrian priestly caste that was a Persian prophet, largely associated with Hellenistic mind, predicting the future, astrology. Any astrology fans in here? Don't raise your hands, you'll be in trouble. Or they could have more simply been like sorcerers, known for interpreting dreams, or like diplomacy, like knowing wisdom, like the wise thing to do, and using magical incantation religious practices. They also more likely traveled with many more people than just three. That ruins the song. Actually, in Eastern Christian tradition, they say 12, that they traveled with 12 people. But even more likely than that, they traveled with like probably in the 20s, because they had guards, they had servants, they had helpers, they had tag-alongs. So this was a large group of people that were traveling that far, right? These men were also highly studied, and were exposed to a lot of different beliefs and religions. At that time, they were definitely significant pockets of the Jewish people in Persia and Babylonia at that time, because history, they got exiled to Babylon, then they went back to Jerusalem, but not everybody went. Some stayed behind. And so these wise men, these magi, were absolutely exposed to rabbis, Jewish teachings, prophecies, In fact, like for instance, like the one that I'm thinking of mostly is the one in Numbers. A star will come out of Jacob. A scepter will rise out of Israel. They heard this one. They also know that they were hearing Old Testament prophecies. It wasn't a secret to that area. We actually know this because there is a famous quote by a renowned Roman historian, Suetonius. We have really messed up on names, people. We've lost it. Those are so much better. He said this, and he was writing, historical accounts around that time. He said, throughout the whole of the East, there had spread an old and persistent belief. Destiny had decreed that at that time, men coming forth from Judea would seize power and rule the world. So this was not like a secret. This was well known throughout the area. Everyone was looking for this king that was supposed to be born out of Judea. Now, that doesn't explain the star, though. And the star is where my skepticism is the strongest. Because, did that really happen? Did it really happen? Because I know that there's some things that happen and it's cool, but did it really happen? Actually, it might have. And because I also, back in the day, I wanted to be an astronomer when I was a kid, and then somebody's like, you have to be good at math. I'm like, well, that's out. So, so I do get really interested in the planets and the stars and things. So one of the things was there was, at that time, a recorded conjunction of the planets that would have been extremely bright, considering that the night sky was not, there wasn't a lot of buildings or things at that time. So it would have been extremely bright. And here's where it gets really cool. Are you ready? So in ancient Babylonian astrology, Jupiter represents the primary deity. And when Jupiter came close to Saturn, which represented the Jews, inside the constellation Pisces, which represented Palestine, the Magi referred to Jupiter as the star of the king they were seeking. And in association, Saturn and Pisces showed them in which nation, the Jews, and where, Palestine, to look for him. That's pretty darn cool. I don't know if that's really what brought them there. I don't know. It could have been that. It also could have been a supernova that was recorded by Chinese and Korean astrologers and astronomers at that time. It happened. We have recordings of it. Or it could have been an angel. That would be very in line with the story, right? It totally could have been an angel. These angels have been popping up all over the place in this story already. Why not? Could have been an angel. They're all over the place. And they're just surprising people and scaring them. Big deep breath. I wrote that in my notes because too much studying, too many facts. I even skipped a lot. For me, it is very easy to get wrapped up in the possibilities and the historical context and all that jazz of you heard me, that's a lot. That's a lot of stuff. When the truth is, for me, that is not where I find the most meaning. And that's not really where I hear God speak. It's not in those, are those things bad? No, they are fun and fantastic, absolutely. However, for today, I don't want us to get lost in those things. And that is really, honestly, the beauty of this church is that we don't have to get lost in what actually happened. We can look at it in a fresh way. So I want to focus on the symbolism of the star in this story. So to shift our focus to the symbolism of the story, let's read the opening words of the gospel according to John. Some of you may even have this memorized if you want to follow along. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was with God in the beginning. Through him all things were made. Without him nothing was made that has been made. In him was life, and that life was the light of all mankind. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it. And then skipping a few verses ahead, it says, the true light that gives light to everyone was coming into the world. He was in the world, and though the world was made through him, the world did not recognize him. And then later, Jesus himself says, I am the light of the world. Whoever follows me will never walk in darkness, but will have the light of life. There is beautiful symbolism in the gospel accounts of light and darkness, that really the first place in the book of Matthew that symbolism comes to fruition is this star. It's the first place that it's like, boom, light. And I mean, and if we look at it from a literary storytelling point of view, this is a really beautiful moment in the story. In the dark night sky, an unmistakably unique, brilliantly bright star appears in the west, and men of a completely different religion and culture are so filled with awe and wonder that they are compelled to begin a long journey towards this guiding light in the darkness that leads them to a small house in Bethlehem, where they find a toddler. At this point, Jesus is a toddler. A toddler who is the true light of the world. And like the star that guided the Magi to him, he will be the guiding light to the world. And at his little feet, his little toddler feet, they give him gifts fit for a king as they bow and worship him. To me, I imagine this moment and this large group of foreign priestly men bowing before this child. Can you imagine what Mary and Joseph were thinking? Like, what are you guys doing in our house? Fancy clothes. These men who followed a light in the darkness, who led them to a toddler Jesus. This was the symbolism that was beginning something very powerful in the story. And of course, right, this symbolism is powerfully applicable to us, right? Because just like these magi, we also seek a light to be guided by, do we not? I don't know about you all, but there have been many times lately where I feel a little lost in the darkness of the world. Because boy, it has been extremely apparent lately. Like it always is, but especially lately for some reason. It feels very dark. And I too I'm searching and have longed for a guiding light to show me which way to go, to lead me to the place where I belong. And anyone who has heard a sermon before can easily predict where I'm going with this. And if you can't, good, because I need at least one of you to be surprised. And honestly, you'd be correct. I am going to encourage us to reorient ourselves to the light of Christ. That's it. That's where we're going. However, I do feel it is important to address a particular problem that we have right now for us in this whole light, dark thing going on. And that is, in our current cultural moment, darkness looks a lot more like light. Darkness looks a lot more like light. Let me explain. Back in 2016, when my family first moved to Texas to help Brett, I got a job at Lucas Christian Academy, which is this tiny little university model school in Lucas, Texas. Lucas is this small rural community on the other side of Wiley, very small town. There's a lot more land. The lots have a lot more space between them. It's that vibe. It's that vibe. And so we at my school, we were about to get new football field lights. And I was really excited because that meant we could do night games. It's going to bring more people out. As the student life director, I'm excited about this possibility. Well, the people who were backed up to the field were not excited about this possibility. Why? Because they're like, light pollution. The light pollution is going to ruin the vibe of our little town. It's going to ruin the health of our children. It's going to ruin everything. And I was so annoyed. At these people because I'm like, guys, it is not that bad. It's not that bad. Like, you can have free tickets to the games. It was so frustrating. So it actually launched me into research, as these things normally do. And what I found about light pollution at that time was pretty astounding. And now, being a special education teacher, my life revolves around data. So I went back and looked at updated data. In a recent paper, 2023, this author found that light pollution of the world's night skies has increased by as much as 10% a year since 2011. 10% a year. I don't math well, but I can understand that on some level. Based on star counts made by citizen scientists, paraphrasing the authors, the night sky would brighten by a factor of about 4 over the duration of human childhood, strongly reducing the visibility of stars. Really, in a nutshell, it's just that the visibility of stars and ultimately the beauty of the night sky is rapidly disintegrating. So ultimately, while I was annoyed with these people, I did eventually side with them. I did kind of say, actually, they have a really good point here. It is going to really affect this little town that has no big buildings in it. So, and this is my point, is in our current culture, the problem isn't darkness, but it's too much light. We have thousands of stars or guiding lights telling us that they will lead us to where we need to go. Thousands. I mean, we could think of some here. I'm going to sound like an old curmudgeon when I say this, but social media, advertisements for the next big thing, a new romantic relationship, money, alcohol addiction, drugs, all of these things act more like a light promising to guide you to where you want to go. And spiritually speaking, these things become light pollution in our lives. It becomes light pollution, drowning out all the other lights. And it makes it harder and harder to see the guiding light of Christ. And this is actually incredibly harmful to us as people. Actually, Brett, when I brought this idea up to Brett, he had mentioned something else too, and we see this in the animal kingdom. So, for instance, moths, you can see even up here, like I was noticing, there's moths and bugs up here. They are, for millions of years, they used the moon to navigate. And then, on January 27th of 1880, the year of our Lord, Thomas Edison patented the light bulb. And from that point on, like thousands and thousands and thousands of artificial moons were being created. And talk about a life-changing thing for moths. Every light is like a little artificial moon. And then get this, then we created bug zapping lights that draw moths and other bugs in with extremely attractive ultraviolet light. Actually, you guys, go look it up. The ultraviolet light, they can't resist it. They can't. And so we draw them into their deaths. Psst. Gone. And I know it's kind of funny, but then you think about it and you're like, oh, that's kind of dark. Because it is. And so this is why I say that the darkness for us, looks a little more like light. This is a sad and potent image of our current problem. That we have so many artificial guiding lights, just like moths are just bouncing off of bulbs, thinking that they have found their thing. That's kind of us. We have found some sort of guiding light, and we're either just bouncing off bulbs or being drawn into our deaths by certain lights. And that is why I say that the darkness for us looks more like light. But glory be to God. In him was life, and that life was the light of all mankind. The light shines on the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it. Amen? So the question is, how do we begin to discern between the lights? What is the real light? What is not the real light? What is death? What is not? So my mom and my brother and my mom was a drama director at a church. Remember when skits were a big thing in churches? When did that end? Let's bring that back. She was a drama director at a big church, and something happened at this church that actually forced us out of that community, and we actually became very, very much people on the fringe. And people kind of stopped talking to us, and it was really bad. I remember as a kid, I was probably 7. But I remember it vividly, like how people suddenly looked at us differently. And then, so we were on the fringe, we were very sad, but then there was this tiny little Quaker church up the road from our house. Tiny little Quaker church, and they brought us in, and they said, you are now in our family, and we became what is officially known as adopted Quakers. We were adopted Quakers because we weren't born into it, but they took us in. They adopted us. And that church changed the trajectory of my life forever. In a nutshell, I'll go very quick. I went to that church, which led me to attend a Quaker college in Kansas, which led me to attend a Quaker-founded seminary, which led me to meet Brett, which led me to move to Texas, which led me to this moment right here. That little church changed my life. Changed my life. Not only, yes, yay for changed lives. But also the Quaker beliefs and interpretation of scriptures was so in line with my heart. Like, for instance, the most influential belief that Quakers have for me is that of the inner light. And really, like, you could simplify it to it's the indwelling of the Holy Spirit. It's simply the presence of God. But here's what's unique about it. They believe that it is in every person, not just Christians. Every single human, despite their religion, despite anything that could separate them, they have it, the inner light. And and of course, you can see how that would have led me to this community and led me to what we do here and our values here. We love the Quakers. Also, fun fact about the Quakers, first denomination to let women preach. Love the Quakers. The other thing they say, and I love this, Quakers don't say, I'll pray for you. They say, I'll be holding you in the light. Some of my friends hear me say this to them, like, I love this. I love this. And because in what this means for us I get too excited about Quakers. What this means for us in the context of this message is that we don't have to be discouraged by the many lights and how confusing it could be, because the light of Christ is within us. So to begin to discern the difference between the artificial guiding lights of culture and the light of Christ, it's through spiritual disciplines and inner work we go inward to follow the light, not outward. Do you see the difference? And so to do this, we practice what Brett and I usually always end up mentioning in our sermons in some way: spiritual disciplines. Slowing down, contemplative prayer, solitude, silence. There are many ways to practice these things, and Brett has talked about them a lot, as have I. Pretty much every sermon I've preached talks about these in some way. You know, we bring them up so often because these are the practices that draw us closer to Christ and help us follow that light. And so rather than say, here's how you practice silence, because I've done that several times, I'm going to share two reframing thoughts that helped me as I was kind of diving into practicing these spiritual disciplines. One of those things is I believe that one of, if not the hardest aspects of spiritual disciplines is simply that is all the mental hoop jumping we have to do to even begin, let alone have a consistent practice, right? Whether it's you're feeling like you don't have enough time, or there's too many distractions, or maybe you feel like you just aren't cut out for this. These practices are vital, right? And so there is this quote, this book. I highly recommend this author. His name is Martin Laird. In his book, Ocean of Light, he describes these spiritual disciplines, specifically contemplative prayer, as a process of decluttering one's inner world. Here's the quote. Think of a bright and spacious room whose polished wooden floor is covered with mounds of clutter of whatever sort. The practice of contemplation, or silence, solitude, prayer, gradually declutters our minds, revealing the brightly polished floor, the radiant core of all that we did not realize was already there. This metaphor has been so helpful for me. Because honestly, when I'm in a bad mood, one of the main things that helps me is I pick an area of my apartment and I clean it. I declutter it, I clean it, I organize it, and it's like an instant mood lifter. And that is what spiritual disciplines do for us inwardly, is we are decluttering our space within our hearts and minds. Another aspect of practicing spiritual disciplines that is tough for me is that I always feel like when the more I practice them, the worse I am at them. Like the more time I spend in silence, the harder it is. The more I pray, the more I feel like I sound stupid, or like I always feel like I am a beginner, and I don't want to be a beginner. I want to be a guru. I want to be the master of spiritual disciplines, and people who would come to me and ask me how to be like me, and I would say it will never happen because I'm a master. That mentality, though, is very problematic. It's very problematic, but it is like, think about our world, especially America. That is what we do. We want to be the best at everything. But Thomas Merton, who is, if you know me, my spiritual father, amazing author, he writes this, he addresses it perfectly. He says, "We do not want to be beginners, but let us be convinced of the fact that we will never be anything else but beginners all our life." Can I get an amen? It's such a relief to realize like we're always going to be beginners. And there's always going to be like a challenging aspect to practicing these spiritual disciplines, but that is the inner work that allows us to recognize the light of Christ that is already present and guiding us. So, yes, Advent is a time of waiting, it's a time of preparation, candle lighting. But I also firmly believe it is a season of reorienting our hearts and minds toward Jesus Christ, the true light of the world. And though we are surrounded by a barrage of artificial guiding lights, may we, the children of God, do everything in our power to follow the guiding light of Christ.